Hello everyone, and welcome to this evening's Nutshell discussion. I hope that you're warm and well wherever you're joining us from. If this is your first Nutshell, thank you for joining us. If you're returning, we're so happy to have you back. My name is Katie Adams, and I am the Research and Demonstration Farm Manager here at the Savanna Institute. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. We're a nonprofit organization based out of Wisconsin and Illinois, focused on agroforestry research and education. We truly believe that widespread agroforestry can help restore ecosystems, build resilience, and support strong economies of cooperation between farmers, researchers, and perennial industry builders. We do this work through a variety of avenues. We host on-farm field days, we offer print and online resources, mainly focused on key agroforestry practices, land access and leaf structures, as well as the basics of establishing tree crops. And all of these are available for free on our website. We're building a network of demonstration farms across central Illinois and southern Wisconsin, and are excited to have our first agroforestry apprenticeship cohort this year, some who might be joining us on the line tonight. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Hegner Family Foundation, as well as North Central SARE. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring you these discussions for free. During tonight's Nutshell, if you're joining us from a computer, I want to invite you all to share your questions and comments in the chat box on the free conference call platform. I will monitor those throughout the Nutshell and make sure that every question and comment is addressed at the very end during the Q&A session. If you're joining us by phone, I'll give instructions on how to ask a question after Lindsay's presentation. And just for your information, everyone is currently muted for better sound quality. So now on to the main event. We are so honored to welcome our presenter for the evening, Lindsay Rebhan of Ecological Design. Lindsay is co-owner of Ecological Design, a woman-owned land planning and design firm. A specialist in agroecology, land use, farm design, and land management, Lindsay works with farmers, landowners, food nonprofits, and organizations to increase the natural wealth of land over time. Lindsay co-teaches an annual permaculture design course at Macedon Valley Farm and an undergraduate course on environmental sustainability at HECUA at Lily Springs Farm. She serves on the advisory council of the Savanna Institute as well. Lindsay is passionate about seeing land come alive with life, employment, learning, and nourishment. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to get things started. Please hold on one moment while we switch presenters. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm losing my voice a little bit, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit, scratchy throat. But thank you for having me tonight. And so I'll just jump right in tonight. Our theme is resilient agroecosystems. And my business partner, Paula Westmoreland, and I own Ecological Design. It's a company she started in 2000, and I came on in 2005. And we're based out of the Minnesota-Wisconsin Twin Cities area. And I homestead in Wisconsin and we do the majority of our work in the Midwest and a little bit beyond. So just a little bit of the context of where I'm coming from here. Is that I was born and raised in Nebraska, and I have two young children who continue to motivate me to do the work that we do for a better future here on Earth. And my parents were a teacher and social worker by trade, so I grew up 2 generations separated from farming. And we had small food gardens, and I remember my dad planting the first prairie garden at his middle school, and those seeds were instilled in me and set off a wildfire that has allowed me to find my roots and my calling. The other context I ground this work in is that we're in a time of massive land transfer here in the United States. And so over 500 million acres, second only to the land transfer the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, really is what we're in the middle of right now. And the average age of the farmer is nearing 60, and many within a decade or less of retirement. So we're entering into this era, and I believe it's critical to support our land managers and our beginning farmers and ranchers right now to help build the soil, increase the nutrient density of our food, and provide a viable way of life. So at Ecological Design, we're grounded in this paradigm. If you want clean water, we have to get the biology back into our soils. And if you want to grow and harvest the crops, we have to build the soil and the only way to reach these endpoints really is to improve the life in the soil. So we do focus a lot on water and soil, with our focus being the foundation of resilient agroecosystems. So we map, we design, we consult, and we manage installations and work with communities to enhance their ecosystems. We are a whole systems design company, but we definitely have an emphasis on perennial agroecosystems and no-till agriculture. So to create a regenerative system, we need to be grounded. So I like to start off with landowners, with land stewards, managers, farmers, and being grounded and rooted in who you are and where you are. So this means really clarifying your vision as much as possible and taking stock of your situation. So knowing your holistic context is really critical. We do use permaculture design to guide our process here, and by that I mean a design system of beneficial relationships based on observation of nature and indigenous traditional knowledge. So vision and assessment is our first step, and it's the foundation of a good design. We find that with annual agriculture, we're often just trying to diversify, build the soil, enhance and clean the water. But with perennial agroecosystems, it really requires more planning for success. So again, in knowing and being grounded and rooted, regenerative farming is based on an understanding of place. So our place right now here is in the upper Midwest, and what you're looking at is pieces of what this place used to look like. It's an oak savanna, a grassland savanna, and this grassland woodland mix makes a very highly productive and diverse ecosystem. That cycles water, it sequesters carbon in deep soils, and it creates high value wildlife, food and habitat. The savannas were maintained historically through wildfires set by lightning, set by Native Americans, and grazing herbivores like bison and elk were managing these large ecosystems. And before that, the megafauna of North America, so the ground sloth, the giant beaver, the woolly mammoth, the North American horse and camels, and this is what we call regenerative disturbance. So building deep soils in North America through trampling, grazing, depositing manure, and allowing for long rest periods in between. So fast forward to the modern day, how do we mimic this productive system to create an agriculture that has that capacity to self-renew and improve over time? Regenerative farming. So how do we get there? What is our framework, our paradigm, our tools? We acknowledge these three pillars of knowledge in our works of traditional ecological knowledge, Western scientific knowledge, and observation, analysis, and feedback. And this is what we combine in order to really listen to the land and the people on it. Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, says, to be native to a place, we must learn to speak its language. So I'd say that is a good goal for all of us. And for whole systems design, we really look at the triple bottom line, as you might have heard more in a business context, or the three-legged stool, as you might have heard in an environmental studies context. And again, it just provides a framework for thinking in terms of the whole of relationships, of flows, of patterns, of synergies. So today I'm highlighting more of our ecological and social strategies and our tips that we find are most important to leverage when having an ecological farm. So the first thing, I guess, is that social often gets left off to the end, so I just wanted to include a bit about our social paradigm and lens at the beginning. So really start wherever you are. Maybe you have land, maybe you don't. We cannot have resilient agroecosystems unless the keystone species, which we're saying is ourselves, humans, is also living resiliently, right? So the next step is really to assess yourself and understand your needs, your resources, your limits. If you are on a piece of land right now, what are the current flows on the farm? What are your routines? Do you have a part-time job? Do you work off-farm? Do you have small children? Do you have aging parents? What's your time and your money flows? What's the strength of your off-farm relationships? Really, what do you enjoy doing? Do you love being on the tractor all day? Know what that is about you, what you love to do. Do you know that you like to be in the dirt, in the soil? What type of work? Are you a plant or an animal? Are you a value-added person? How do you like working? Do you enjoy really working by yourself and being in nature? Do you enjoy working on a team or managing others? And then also thinking about your own age. How old are you going to be when these crops are ready to harvest? And so really doing this flow work can map the situation for you before you even begin saying what kind of crops you want to have to get going on your farm. Two other things that I just really believe is important is mentoring. So the work that we're doing here is for the 7th generation. It's for the children, the grandchildren, and we're only stewarding this earth for a brief time here. So bringing a younger person with you on this journey to learn, to work, to play in regenerating the earth is really important. Being able to share a story about what you did together, about what you learned, about your mistakes, about your lessons, and passing on those seeds of knowledge is extremely important. And then also being a mentor yourself. So a lot of people say, I don't know enough to be a mentor. And we all know something that we could bring along someone with. I think it's very important, and it's been extremely important in my life personally to have my own mentors at different stages of life, to be moving through and learning these lessons that have been able to bring me faster and deeper into this world of agroecology. So be a mentor, find a mentor. All right, so regenerative farming, ecology. How are we good regenivores? How are we good regenitarians? As my colleague Peter Allen from Mastodon Valley Farm says, are we eating our ecosystem? If we are, then we're working towards food sovereignty. And so food sovereignty is the right of peoples to a healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and the right to define our own food and agriculture systems. And so I believe this is very important, and we find this, up here at the top of the slide is Dave Jackie's. Dave Jackie's the author of Edible Forest Gardens, and he likes to talk about food, fuel, fiber, fodder, fertility, pharmaceutical, and fun, the 7 F's of permaculture. And those really do encapsulate a lot of what we're looking at when we're looking at a holistic farm, but also in our life. Where are we getting our fuel from, our fuel shed? Where are we getting our clothes from, our fiber shed, etc.? Where are we getting our medicines from? So really looking at all of this amounts to food sovereignty. So I have a few urban examples included in this presentation, just in terms of few things that we've seen in our work, select projects, and the fact that we're living in a world now where 80% of the population or more in the U.S. live in urban and suburban areas. So people in the city also need fresh food, fresh water, and resilience. This is an image from City of Refuge from Starhawk. So Frogtown Farm is a 13-acre farm in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I like to include this as an urban agriculture example. If you have access to land or not, you're not excluded. And there is so much work to be done. There's a lot of opportunity to grow more food in the city. This is one of the largest urban farms in the nation. And it has a very unique situation where it has a 25-year lease with the Parks Department for this land. And they provide a neighborhood farmers market and also have contracts with local food banks to produce the food. You can see, if you can see my cursor, the bands around, the circular bands around the farm are all perennial. So it has a base, a foundational base of perennial, a form of alley cropping, and in between the fields are vegetables, herbs, tillable annual agriculture. And here in the middle is more of fruit tree orchard crops where it gets a bit more steep. So yeah, we put in asparagus, raspberries, aronia, fruit trees for a perennial foundation, and there's lots of cover cropping happening here. As with most urban farms, there are a lot of soil issues. So just really being aware of your soil, testing your soil, knowing your soil when you're working in an urban food system. Season extension is key, whether you're in the city or not, but hoop houses and greenhouses are just also becoming really increasingly necessary with violent storms throughout the year. So being able to keep a consistent growing, providing a little less risk to the farmer is a huge boon to our bottom line here. And I could probably do a whole presentation on the uses of shipping containers for urban ag particularly, but first, we got a shipping container at Frogtown Farm just for on-farm security when there's no barn. It makes a great, dry, secure storage. And then this one was turned into a CoolBot cooler. So it's a walk-in cooler. A CoolBot is just a walk-in cooler that's insulated, and it's cooled with simple air conditioning. So a lot of potential here in the city. And one thing I like to say is that we need to demonstrate growing food. We need to grow food where people are eating it. Joel Salatin has a quote about how the first supermarket supposedly appeared on the American landscape in 1946. And that's not very long ago. Until then, where was all the food? Dear folks, he says, the food was in homes, gardens, local fields, and forests. It was near kitchens, near tables, near bedsides. It was in the pantry, the cellar, and the backyard. So this is a restaurant in Minneapolis called Tiny Diner that we worked on and really supports the local food system in a big way. And it was a former gas station and repair shop. And the owner, Kim Bartman, who is a visionary entrepreneur and restaurant owner in the Twin Cities, in 2012, really wanted to build permaculture gardens and foods with solar energy on this very contaminated piece of property. So these are some of the areas all around this very small, hence its name, Tiny Diner, on a corner lot in South Minneapolis, really came to life in a way that has really blown everybody away. But the amount of contamination, the lead, the gas spills, 4 layers of buried concrete, etc., had to be dealt with first. And then we used strategies to get growing above contamination to provide renewable energy and demonstrate really a micro version of what we teach for farm-scale permaculture. So everything that we do in the urban is possible. It's just on a smaller scale, minus, cows and some larger livestock like that. We even have some water harvest here happening off the buildings. There's a little aqueduct that goes to a cistern. We're really big on water harvest as much as possible, and think this is a great way to demonstrate it. Native bees and honeybees are another piece that's important. You're going to find that across the board, whether we're talking about a large-scale farm or a small lot in the city. Supporting our pollinators is extremely important. So here we have some educational opportunities around native plants and native pollinator habitat. And then one story up on the roof, we have the honeybees. And, vertical design is really important in the city. We're finding not too high, of course, but one story like this actually keeps the bees a bit away from the customers and provides a business for a local woman, Mademoiselle Miel, who makes honey candies for local hotels. And Tiny Diner gets the pollination benefits from all of this. And the last urban example that I want to highlight is the fact that we can have many prairies and oak savannas in the city. So it's just on a miniature scale. So I really encourage everyone, depending upon what land you might have access to manage or to steward, to really say, hey, what do we have for native plants here? What's our native foundation? Where are we living and what's the best native plants that we could put here? So this is an intensive mix of grasses, nectar, and pollen species, forbs, that are in the understory of mostly a bur oak surrounding a dentist's office in Madison. But it's a really great way to bring back the life, bring back urban wildlife, bring beauty back to your place, but also harken back to what this place was. So now I'm going to highlight some of the things that, not all of our process, obviously, when we go through designs, but really some things that I think are very important for us to take into account when we're working on farmland on larger scale properties. And the first one is historical. So finding the oldest person that you know in the area, talking to the former landowners, and really doing your research on the history is extremely important. We found so many game changers in our designs when we've looked into the past. Being able to know pre-settlement vegetation is also really excellent, because if we're moving towards regenerative agriculture, we want to have this base of what this land used to be when it was managed naturally. You can also look up in a free Google Earth, the historical flyovers, which mostly start at like 1990. So they're not super old, but they do show you a lot of buildings, a lot of things happen from the 90s plus. So you can kind of see what was there if you were not on your land at that time. So it's a great free feature, just the historical. That's the time button up there at the top of your Google Earth Pro. So knowing your historical layer is very important. Knowing your water layer is probably even more important. You're not always going to know when things flooded, and that's where you can get that history layer to come in. But looking up the flows and trying to draw them in whichever way you can. So there's a lot of resources available to us at the county level and at the Department of Natural Resources level that we can look for our water maps, and then simply walking our properties as well to understand the water flows. And in permaculture, it's typical to say, ideally, you observe your land for 4 seasons in a temperate climate where we have 4 distinct seasons, that you observe your land for 4 seasons before you made any major change or earthwork or any sort of major land change, because you really want to know where those microclimates are and where that water is moving and or freezing. On this bottom picture here, the 3 terraces are old USD terraces made long before this owner acquired the land, but also shows man-made manipulative more drain tile and things like that going invisibly moving water underneath the land. So being able to understand the water above the land and below the land is extremely important. This is another way that we might look at water for looking at what's actually coming off of the building. It's another way that we all at home can also just kind of map our water and make sure that everything has an outlet, multiple outlets, and go outside when it's raining and really observe what's happening. And then we can figure out the best areas that we want to capture our water, our free, clean water, that's coming down, and then the ways that we want to utilize our water, whether we're pushing it out to the crops or using it closer in. So testing our soil and knowing our soil has been, you would think, a pretty obvious thing, but a lot of people do not test their soil before they grow food in it. And we've come across a number of unfortunate contaminations because of this. So testing your soil is great, particularly where you're going to grow things that you're going to eat. In a larger way, you can just go and get a free soil test, a soil map, and download what you see up on the right from the Web Soil Survey. And the Web Soil Survey will give you a general overhead of what kind of soils you're looking at, and the geology also refers to the geology below that. And these are all different forms of maps. Soil map down here came from the county in ways that we look, because a lot of the ecological communities that we see, the natural communities, can also follow soil, and also water will follow soil map patterns oftentimes. So map your soil and test your soil. So two other really great things that I think we can all do at home, particularly if we're working with a larger piece of land, is to first identify what the ecological communities are. In your Department of Natural Resources, you can look up what part of the state you're in, and that will be assigned an ecological community defined by the Department of Natural Resources. And within that, you can start to identify, okay, this is what this was. This is what this is trying to be. This is what I think, based on the species that I'm seeing, this is. So it's an oak opening, it's a floodplain forest, it's an oak savanna, it's emergent marsh, it's a dry mesic prairie, that kind of thing. And so this was really helpful just in a larger overscale of knowing, kind of honing in on where you're going to move towards in the design for regenerative agriculture. And then once you know that ecological community, you can kind of then transition into what is the ecological design opportunity there. So is that, old hayfield grassland have an opportunity to be an oak savanna or to be a prairie? So really looking at the opportunities that you have based off of doing a bubble diagram, basically, of the ecological communities you have. These are areas that we see as holistic, and we won't be able to get into all of these today, but to have regenerative design components for your farm are the most important. So waterworks, earthworks, to have buffers, to have beneficial insects and predators, to have your production crops, to include some agroforestry, to have livestock, and to include a social design also for your farm. And we include these in all different ways. I'm going to flip through some examples of designs that include all of those components and what they can look like. And again, you can draw these at home. You don't have to computerize them. You can use Google Earth. Also, there's free programming out there to do it. So one thing about production crops, I guess the main thing that, there's a whole host of tree crops and perennial crops that I've seen posted in previous nutshells. And so, really going through those, I think, is a great resource. And from my perspective, I just want people to really think about the succession design. So again, back to how old are you going to be when this crop is mature, and how are you making money in the meantime? So we see it as early, mid, and late succession crops, and that's a piece of design. So just as you make your decisions on crop design, aside from soil, climate, labor availability, equipment, markets, etc., the list goes on, we really want to be thinking about this time frame so that you have short-term cash flow. So some of these short-term things include livestock, hay, berries, flowers, grains, etc. And so while you're working those early term succession crops, then you'll have your mid-succession crops come in. And this is looking a bit more towards those berries. You might get berries, earlier than that, but you're really full on coming into your orchard trees at this point, your grapes and your hazelnuts. And livestock is kind of a given here through any of the successions. And then the late succession crops, we consider more than 8 years. So really looking at the coppice trees, the woodlot trees, the nut trees, and the timber. We consider perennial crops the backbone of a farm. So whether you're planting them for wildlife or combination of wildlife and selling of the crops, being able to have those in place while you're having your early succession crops is super important. One of the main reasons why we think that perennial crops are so important, like these black currants, is because of their value as medicine. And so really being able to understand and change our understanding and our relationship to food is important. And so being able to test, taste, and know these varieties is extremely important. This is the Chernaya black currant that we got from Paul Otten originally, who brought some from Eastern Europe. Elderberry is another really high value medicine, and that we like to see in alley cropping situations or silvopasture situations. Hazelnuts. So a quick note on water. I'm going to show just a quick one.
This civic property has been drain tiled for 100 years. So when we started doing our designs and our site assessments and gathering all the historical information, we have some drain tile maps from 1915 with old terracotta 4-inch drain tiles up to 2012 with modern day drain tiles. So the story of the land is the same all in this area. After colonization, the land was drained and plowed. And so as it continuously drains, the natural water systems and watersheds have been artificially created and broken. This farm here has to go down 350 feet to get away from the nitrates in the water table. So we know that we're surrounded by toxic water. And so one of our goals here is to renaturalize the watershed and remediate the water, create a biological farm, and we will positively affect our neighbors' property as well by the soil remediation and water remediation that's happening here.
So I'd like to show that video because we see this across the landscape in the Midwest. And really, some states have drain tiled more than others, but this is a huge issue that we do work with. And so renaturalizing the watershed is extremely important to us. Water naturally wants to meander, and really allowing water to meander means allowing it to oxygenate, allowing it to deposit sediment, filter and clean itself, and allowing that biology to thrive. And we see across the Midwest ditches and drain tiles increasing the toxicity, increasing the soil erosion. And so really encourage you to test your water, know your water, and see how many different ways on your property you can cycle water before it leaves, but also slowing, spreading, and sinking it, as Brad Lancaster reminds us, and also, to really plant buffers along any of our waterways. This is a ditch that was allowed to renaturalize itself. For some young farmers getting back on the land, there's nothing there. They have raw land. And so putting up a quick structure like this is a great quick way to start to harvest water on site. Has multiple functions. You can store things underneath it, but it's a solid surface that you can start getting water collection going for your animals or yourself. So these are just some of the quick top things that we see hindering or helping perennial farms get going. So we see a lot of people getting excited about perennial crops and putting them out in a big field, and there's nothing to protect them. So really encouraging you to think about windbreaks and get your windbreaks planted, and you will have a lot less stress and your plants will grow a lot faster. if you get those windbreaks going. We love hybrid poplars and willows, particularly getting those in there. You know, hybrid poplars are essentially free nursery stock. Once they get big enough, they're super easy to propagate, and they can be coppiced, and they grow back in a fan shape, so increasing their ability to catch drift spray. Just like willow, they bounce back fairly easy after being drifted on, so they're great if you have conventional farming neighbors that you're going to get sprayed from. I really like Siberian pea shrub. Just remembering nitrogen-fixing plants only fix nitrogen when they're being eaten or grazed or pruned or mowed. So there's many different shrubs that could be a great addition to your windbreak or food hedges. Each climate zone and soils, you know, vary. And then just you know, as we're entering into winter right now, just reminding ourselves about snow fences and how we used to have snow fences, and the railroads, you know, planted tons of trees and shrubs with great success, and now we've kind of forgotten about that, and we don't have anything blocking the snow onto the road. So Plains farms need trees. Pollinators, just a reminder that to go and look for pollinator money in your county, in your state, CP42 can be really expensive, can be like $800 an acre for seed, but you can get other different ones. If you're doing a cost share, go for the expensive one. This is an example of working with an NRCS TSP, technical service provider, and getting a pollinator plan, which includes bunchgrass pollinator nesting for birds, but also herbaceous pollinator foraging. And this is kind of what it looks like when you work with a TSP for a pollinator plan on your farm. It's a great way to enhance, particularly if you have orchards. The last couple years, we've grown hemp at Lily Springs Farm in Osceola, Wisconsin. And one thing I'm super proud of is being able to have clover, buckwheat, and phacelia in the alleys. So even if you're growing an annual plant, just really being able to increase your pollinator potential in your alleys. The form of cover cropping, alley cropping. And this is just another way, again, on your DNR, each state has your ecological communities, and you can look up your rare plants and their associations, and I highly encourage you to do this. We put these into little graphs and tables for ourselves, but this is ways for you to kind of know what you should be putting out there in order to encourage those animals to come back. So look up your rare animals and their associations, ecological communities for the DNR. If plants aren't naturally your thing, my colleague Paula Westmoreland and Dan Halsey run this plant database, and it's called Natural Capital Plant Database. And so I just encourage you to look this up. It's really, really cool. The URL is permaculture plant data, and you can look up plants by your zone, what kind of type, what kind of sun you have, what kind of soil you have, and even what you're looking for, the ecological functions or the human uses. And I think it's a great resource, particularly if you didn't grow up with botany, horticulture, or ecology in your wheelhouse. So permaculture plant data, check it out. So on regenerative grazing, I just want to mention, you know, the point about regenerative agriculture is that we're really completing this cycle. So agroecology, multi-species grazing, silvopasture, agroforestry, it's all forms of biomimicry, and it's the way that nature rejuvenates itself. So as Penny Livingston says, like, we are nature working. So we really need to let the animals do the work. Ruminants are our greatest land managers and soil builders. In design-wise, around fencing is a big deal, and so, you know, there's a lot of levels of fencing that we could get into, but basically fencing and watering livestock are often related in farm design, and so working with contour is ideal, but not always possible. And then often animals walk fence lines, so understanding livestock habits and potential for erosion is really important. We see often not enough space for turnarounds and not enough space for animal loading. So those are some of our tips on those fence designs. Things I'm really excited about is electric. So solar and electric renewable energy sources. This is Milkstar Galactica. It's a mobile milking parlor for dairy goats, and it's driven by a Polaris, an electric Polaris, at Paradox Farm in Minnesota. And there's a shelter right here that you can see. And then on the front, there's a little milking parlor. And these dairy goats never have to leave their pasture, and there's no fossil fuels being utilized in this system. Looking to goats as land managers is extremely important, particularly with buckthorn and other things that lots of chemicals are being used on right now. And so we've seen the power of goat browse over the years, and it's really part of a mass land transition that we need right now. Share a herd with your neighbor. Think about creative ways that we can share animals. I'm going to just highlight one of my favorite things. I love pigs, but one of my favorite things about pigs is that I think pigs and vegetable fields seem to go really well together. And this is a pig tractor. It's actually on skids, and it can be pulled by a tractor, but it keeps the pigs moving over and can clean and glean vegetable fields. So we see a lot of veggie CSAs having like a small herd of pigs also. And so I think that this would be another way where it decreases deep wallowing, but allows cleanup in the fields and fertilizing the fields. And then just not underestimating the power of poultry as grass eaters, but also, particularly we're seeing sort of small homestead flocks, sustainable family food. And it's a really great entry point for beginning farmers who need to quickly turn over a product. So Savanna Institute is a great resource to learn about agroforestry. I just want to highlight some of the 5 major funded USDA areas. These are approved, agroforestry techniques approved by the USDA, and there is funding for this. So I really want to encourage you to look into that for your land. Alley cropping is one of my favorite, one of the easiest ways that we can begin doing agroforestry on farms, because you can do this by addition or subtraction, right? Whether you're starting with a woodland or a pasture. This is an example of chamomile, an herb being grown in between asparagus and rye. And this is a larger scale hay and blueberry situation happening. So cover crops also are, the last thing that I'll say in terms of wanting to really highlight things that we need to increase that we're seeing on the land is we need critical biomass. We need more farmers, and we need more cover crops, and more than one kind of cover crop. So really trying to throw as many species you can afford into that mix. We know that increasing 1% organic matter in 1 acre can sequester up to 27,000 gallons of water in that 1 acre. That's no joke. So when we get to a 6-inch or 8-inch rain in a day, it can mean to the farmer whether we're getting a crop or not. So that cover crop rotation is really critical. Radish, sorghum Sudan, sun hemp. Practical farmers of Iowa like to say, don't farm naked. And map your cover crops, because I always forget what I planted. So mapping out what you did and where you're going. So this image is from Lexicon of Sustainability, and I see a lot of abundance happening in this photo, and I want to think about what does it mean to be hopeful when we look at our future, and what do we want to do for our family? What do we want to do for our community? How are we going to create this future? These are baby doll sheep grazing in a vineyard here, but I really want to focus on the abundance, because right now there's a lot of things that could make you feel scarce, and so homestead orchards, neighborhood orchards, community orchards, I think are really important for us to increase. Bringing back the home orchard, remembering old ways of keeping fruit near where you live. Nurseries. We want to see a nursery on every farm. Resilient agroecosystems should have nurseries. So they regenerate when you lose plants. You can give some to your neighbors. You can grow a new patch. And by nurseries, too, it can be mycelium nurseries. You could keep a patch of inoculated wood chips there and share the wealth. Energy. So, what is your resilient energy resources on site? Are you fully reliant on the grid? If not, what is your storage system? So in general, we recommend clients do a quick assessment of their power, their heat, and their water systems, and just think about a backup plan. If your water goes out, maybe you want a simple pump or a bison pump so you can water your family and your livestock. Maybe you want to invest further in windmill solar energy. the last two things I really think are important: mushrooms, bees, and perennial grains. So mycorrhizal patterning. Mycorrhizal fungi is the way that plants talk to each other. And if you haven't gotten into mushrooms, I really want you to encourage you to do that either by checking out Peter McCoy's book, Radical Mycology, up here, or checking out Paul Stamets with Fungi Perfecti. And he has a movie that's just getting screened now in the Midwest. But this is the Stamitzian model for permaculture with a mycological twist. And these are all the different ways that we could include mushrooms into our farm to help build soil, not just for eating, not just for medicine, but to help all the other plants that are going on our permaculture farm. Kernza. So if you haven't heard of Kernza, check it out. It's a small grains revolution. And this is really heralding back to sustainable farm management, rotations, field recovery. But Kernza is a perennial wheat grass. It's being developed by the Land Institute in Kansas and the University of Minnesota Forever Green. It is basically has roots like a prairie grass and is being developed for a seed head that's like wheat that can be combined. And it can withstand heavy rain, drought, and it can be grazed even after combining. So I think this is really, to me, what Wes Jackson and Wendell Berry refer to as part of the 100-year Farm Bill and getting us out of this boom and bust agriculture. Other crops that you could check out also by the Land Institute and the Forever Green Initiative at the University of Minnesota are these oil crops like pennycress, winter camelina, perennial sunflower, and the hybrid hazelnut. So my last, I know I'm getting on time there, Katie, my last shout out is for Farm Hacks. Farm Hack is an open source Creative Commons place for farmers to upload and share their innovations. So it's a tool library, has fabrication plans, there's meetups and events. Farmers have always been creating new systems for themselves and making their tool better. And so a couple of the farm hacks that I think are really important include social farm hacks. So one is being able to really, this is a row mulcher. Sorry, I'm gonna turn the volume down. Is a row mulcher. My slideshow didn't like that. And can you hopefully still see my screen? Let's see.
We can still see, yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm not going to do my row mulcher video because I feel like it was killing the PowerPoint. But anyway, it's capable of hauling, 4.5 yards at a time. It's a Mill Creek compact row mulcher. And we borrowed it from Main Street Project Farm, borrowed it from Bluff Valley Farm. And I think we need to really look at perennial equipment and figure out how we can cooperatively share it. And row mulching is incredibly important, obviously, for perennial agriculture. We need more wood chips. And so this is an old grain bin that makes for great mulching. Repurpose, reuse old grain bins, fill it up with mulch, and pull it along your rows instead of breaking your back. Cooperatively sharing equipment. This is a hazelnut harvester that's shared by 3 different farms. And I think they invested in the trailer together and the equipment, and I really think that we're going to need more of this in the future if we want to see the perennial revolution happen. Buying old blueberry mulchers is another way too. Looking up old, larger scale mulchers that we can pull. This is a flail mower, a 3-point mounted hay rake, basically a rotary rake. And it's a way that we could quickly put lighter, throw the hay onto some of our newer growing woody crops. And throwing the Kingster faria or wine cap spawn into your mulch is another way to just quickly activate your mulch and get the soil builder. You're already putting inoculated mulch onto your plants. So I think it's a really good farm hack. Being able to use tree planters for hazelnuts and smaller shrubs. So you might have to do a little bit of work on the tree planter, but it's a great way to get our woodies out faster on a large scale. And then mobile processing. So whether it's, we're starting to see some legal mobile harvesting of livestock on site, and this is the mobile elderberry destemmer from the Elderberry Cooperative from Chris Patton that we got to utilize at Main Street Project. And elderberry is a highly intensive, laborious plant to process, and so this is a game changer for us, I think. And pedal power, this is a pedal-powered honey extractor from Christy Allen at the Bee's Knees, and there's a myriad of things we can do with pedal power on the farm, and it's really fun to do too. So think about what you can do with pedal power. And then, because we're talking about a lot of crops that people don't know, another social hack is to just have a party. So have an uncommon fruits party. This is our aronia party that we had at Lily Springs Farm. And everybody needs to come with their own aronia recipe and their dish. And you get to share it and taste it. And people get to find out what aronia is all about. And not just about being high nutritious with anthocyanins and antioxidants, but also like how it can taste good. So I think this is really important when we're moving into this world of more uncommon fruits. So skill up, grow your own community and education networks. We do offer one PDC a year. Peter Allen and I, along with Mikkel and Mark Shepard and Peter's wife Mo. And this is in Viroqua, Wisconsin, August 12th through 16th. And that's it.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Lindsay. I learned a whole lot, and we have some questions on the line here. So Hawthorne asks, what is your advice for someone who has had their PDC but isn't sure of the next steps to take?
Absolutely take action. So if you have your PDC, go and find a place that you can work and implement and learn and make mistakes. You know, I think that we see a lot of, there's a lot of different kind of PDCs too, so I don't know which kind you had. Some have more of an emphasis on different aspects, building, energy versus plants or animals, etc. So make sure, you know, do you feel like you got what you wanted out of that PDC? Was it more of a holistic starter for you, Kickstarter? And then now it's time to dig into the areas that you really want to work on and exhibit in your life. We want to see, you know, really a strong amount of work. So I wouldn't say you need to go get another PDC or even go get another advanced training. I think you should just dig into the work.
Cody asked, which is a question that I had as well, what design software do you use for your projects?
Good question. Right now, and it's shifted a lot over the years, we're always using Google Earth for analysis and general concept design, but right now we're using QGIS and also the Adobe Suite, and sometimes CAD, but not often.
Lindsay, one question that I had, and it's something that I'm working on here in Central Illinois, is looking at creative ways to share animals when you are a beginning farmer but aren't living on land, but live in town. Do you have any experience with folks that having different land use and livestock care arrangements?
Yeah, I think it's really, I think it's possible. It just requires, you know, commitment and organization. So being able to identify which of your partners is going to have the land base to host the animals, and then, you know, kind of divvying up your schedule and really planning ahead of who's going to be coming out for the chores, and what are the backup plans for if they get out, etc. Like what are the communication plans? It's definitely possible. We see it especially with wintering, because there's some people that have run animals on their land during the season but not over winter. So we'll also see there's a number of partnerships that I know of where they will overwinter at somebody else's pasture and bale graze, but they still will come over for livestock chores. So I think that those are ways to do it. I think other ways to do it are having like seasonal, so not with the winter, but being able to say, you know, for these these 2 weeks, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Something with a little bit more length is a good way to share things. Otherwise, AM and PM, we see that too of, just always, that there's a morning check that no fences were down, no trees came down, that kind of thing. Everybody's good and has their water. And then we know that with a goal, because it's not like animals aren't, A plus B equals C all the time, right? So being intuitive about, well, we think we're going to move their paddocks or their pastures this coming week, and so let's do that together. So kind of planning something out like that too, where people help move fence on a larger scale, or being able to come and move fence ahead of time. So having a few paddocks fenced out before it happens, is a really good strategy. So yeah, I think sharing, being organized and committed in that schedule is probably the biggest issue aside from winter.
Thanks so much. I know, I wish I could avoid winter sometimes too, even though it's important for dormancy and regeneration.
Great.
Well, if there's no other questions, Lindsay, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and for everyone for joining us tonight. I've recorded the discussion, and after a week or two, we'll have the recording up on YouTube. And I'll make sure to send everyone a link to the YouTube as well as the slides if Lindsay is willing to share those with us. And when you get that email, please fill out our evaluation. It just takes 2 minutes, and it's really helpful for me to see how we can improve these discussions, especially if you know someone that you think would be a really fantastic presenter and be able to share with us. So thank you again for joining us, Lindsay. Thank you again to everyone on the line, and I'll see you at the Perennial Farm Gathering.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful evening.